There are heroes and there are monsters, but most of us are ordinary mortals trapped in times far too turbulent for us. And perhaps when the battle is over, all we shall inherit are the ashes. This was written about apartheid South Africa, a complicated country going from the Boer War to a complicated independence, racism, and finally a path to light. Indian history is also full of complications. There was a time not long ago where a woman burning herself on her husband's pyre was not only deemed the socially responsible thing to do, but an honorable thing to do. There was a time not long ago where a caste system first created as a distinction of labor, varna, became the most insidious thing in the subcontinent, the echoes of which we still face in reports of horrific crimes that take place even to this day. But within it rose people like Vivekananda and Ram Mohan Roy, and they did reform. Within a global Islamic community, that reform is so desperately required. Imagine in an Indian context the Shivites and the Vaishnavites at war with each other, or the Ram Bhakts and the Shiv Bhakts wanting to make separate countries because they so fundamentally disagree with their interpretation of God. In a moment in the world where asking for introspection within the Islamic faith is automatically considered Islamophobia, when you say that if child marriage and widow sannyas and sati were crimes within the Hindu faith, then triple talaq are equal crimes within the Islamic faith, then people who went and studied in Lincoln's Inn, the same university as Jinnah, rise up against you. Such kind of introspection is difficult, but not impossible. This is the internecine war that ravages Islam. Shias versus Sunnis versus Ahmadiyas versus Wahhabi extremists. So what is now happening very near where we are sitting and broadcasting from, very near where my grandparents were born? Two neighboring countries, one Shia majority, one Sunni majority, fighting a same old war with the Pakistani state fighting it in the same old way. A few years ago, we here in India were trying to tell the world that a Kulbhushan Jadhav was kidnapped out of Iran, with the Pakistani state then trying to pitch to the world that he was aiding and abetting Baloch terror. Now, they are trying to pitch to the world that while they wage war against Shia Iran, that it is being done by the Balochis, kill two birds with one stone in the same disgusting, predictable, cliched, horrific way. Target the Iranians, blame the Balochis, so that you can then, to appease the Iranians, target the Balochis. But this time Iran, who has warned them several times that it is just not against India and on its eastern border that Pakistan perpetuates terrorism, but it's also in Afghanistan, and Iran has hit back. Reports coming from several quarters are indicating a strike that has taken place by the Iranian establishment, a very rare one for them, a country that itself has faced several strikes from countries like Israel, for them to hit back. Perhaps even taking an example of not only what the Americans have done in Pakistan, where talking we know doesn't work, only action works, and was of course what we have done with our surgical strike. So where does this end? Let us open up that conversation. Joining us on the broadcast, Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, Professor Madhav Nalapat, and Dr. Wail Abad, and General Dhruv Katoj is with us also. If I can begin with you, Professor Nalapat, what do you suspect has just happened? Because the Pakistanis are happy to claim that it wasn't us, these are Balochi terrorists.
Well, Rishabh, the reality is that the Pakistan army is the gun for hire. And may I say that, when you're hired to different clients, you make more money. And so what they say is that the groups that are unfortunately, quote unquote, rogue elements or retired elements or disconnected elements responsible, not the central command of the armed forces. Certainly not. Well, the reality is that among the favors that Pakistan has done to the United States, for example, is the nourishment, encouragement, training, equipping. I'm sure that they have been well compensated for all this. Groups that enter into Iran, that operate in Iran, and that conduct terror operations. We have heard a lot about the Iranian terror networks, and Iran is a state sponsor of terror. Well, I'd only like to say that when you go to Iran, what they say is that they are themselves a huge victim of terrorism. They say that they are under an existential threat and have been so for quite some time. And they are very clear about the fact that the Pakistan military is one of the factors behind that threat. Now, so far as the Balochistan is concerned, well, the reality is there's a lot of problems happening in the Pakistan segment of the Baloch people's territory, a little less in the Iranian side. But unfortunately, you have, there's a certain amount of porousness in the border between them. With the result, the Pakistan military can send in people, whether they are, ideologically committed Baloch or they are Punjabis. But the reality, this has been happening for a long time. And I think a very clear signal that, look, we are not going to allow it to happen any longer. We are going to take action. And I think part of the reason is Iran understands that the pell-mell drive of the Trump administration to try and ratchet up tensions in the Middle East. Well, the Trump administration, a large number of people led by the former Treasury Secretary, who are hand in glove with Beijing. One of the cabinet members of the Trump administration was well known to be somebody who was very close to Beijing. Her father was extremely close to Beijing. And so this is the Trump administration that we all say was very anti-China. So the reality is that this has been happening for a long time. I think the Iranians have laid down a marker. And frankly, Rishabh, I'm of the view, terrorism has no religion. It has no frontiers. And as a consequence, every religion, every country, and every frontier needs to join in the global war on terror.
Let me quickly get in Dr. Wael Abad into this conversation. Dr. Wael Abad, it is a very complicated game. The Americans, with their imbroglios in Iraq, trying to take on the Iranians via Pakistan, as Professor Nalapat has very carefully described. Wahhabi extremists operating out of the Gulf, also using Pakistan to do the same. The Shia-Sunni internecine war that is not yet ended for some reason. Then the Pakistanis say, okay, how do we kill two birds with one stone? Let's target Shia Iran. Let's appease maybe parts of a Wahhabi faction in Saudi Arabia and the Americans, and then blame the Balochis. And once we blame the Balochis, link the Balochis to Indian support, and then try to claim that it's India that is arming Balochis against both Pakistan and Iran. It's a game so easily called out. What do you make of what has now happened?
Well, I think it is not the new games. Actually, Rishabh, it has been there for long years. In fact, Iran have been asking and urging the Pakistan to really guard their borders, because most of the time, all these secessionist movements supported by the Wahhabis are very active on the border, have been abducting soldiers from Iran, attacking parades of Iranian soldiers. And Iran has released 4 of the soldiers which have been abducted in 2018, and one was killed. by this group in Pakistan, Islamabad, give them the body and give the 4 soldiers, and also this latest operation. So therefore, it is a huge border between the two countries, which is more than 900 kilometers between Pakistan. All this for us is activity of terrorist organization, of drug dealers, there's a huge activity, and of course we do not forget that the Wahhabi have taken full advantage of Pakistan being a rented state during the Afghanistan crisis. So it has been always at the receiving end, and Pakistan also been saying to Iran that we are unable to control. So that's why they don't object, even in certain operation carried out by the Iranian. And Iran told them that we are going to do a surgical strike whenever is needed, whenever we feel that these groups are active. And Iran feeling the vulnerability so much so after the Iranian revolution has taken over in 1979, where the Americans have already made it very clear that they have been supporting any movement to destabilize the Iranian government. And that's what they did with Saddam Hussein, where all the GCC countries have supported him against the Iranian war, which lasted for 8 years, and after which they have dumped him out and they have signed the same agreement that each side, and the total destruction of the economy of both the countries have happened. So therefore, there is a plan in this, and the unfortunate part, which I must say here, the fault lies in certain countries that the minorities on those countries have not given their equal right with the majority. Give them the equal right, they become more vulnerable for an external forces.
Okay, so Dr. Vaidyanathan, there are two clear things here. The two clear things here. One, of course, is can there be hope, sir? Because in this country, I have mentioned that within a Hindu faith here, we've had issues, right? I mean, we have social evils. But we are not seeing today Shivites and Vaishnavites at war with each other, trying to kill each other and divide up the world amongst them. So can there be hope to a Shia-Sunni rapprochement? And if so, where is it going to be found?
It's nothing. The ultimatum goal, actually, Rishabh, is very clear. The whole crisis in the Islamophobia and the Arab Spring and the fighting is to reach a stage where the Sunni Shia comes. So Iran is catch between the two players' shaft, the Caesar. One is the Turkey and the second one is Pakistan.
Bang on.
And both the countries are actively promoting terrorism against Iran.
At what point of time then the second evil in this, Dr. Vaidyanathan, where the utility of Pakistan as the dirty gamester, it's been utilized by America against the Afghans, being utilized by certain sections of the erstwhile Saudi regime against Iran and others, of course utilized against us as well. This dirty terror factory, when does its utility end, sir? Because it's been going on for several decades now.
I think they have already been paying the price. Whoever cooked the poison will test it. And that is what's happening in Pakistan now. They are realizing that joining hand with terrorist organization will only lead to this own destruction. Unless and until the Pakistani establishment realize and recognize that playing with terrorist hand will always burn your own hand, they will never learn. And there where they are learning now. I think the Pakistani army is losing a good number. They have been using the Baluchistan, the northern province. They have all this used by the American and by the Western power and by the Al-Qaeda, and all terrorist groups have found the hubs in this area. And now they have brought the angle of China into it, where there will be always, because of the oil and because of the natural resources, they are going to be more complicated. So Pakistan has to fasten its own belt and address the issues of terrorism.
Well,
you cannot be selective in dealing with terrorism.
Well, that's the hope, and you are a hopeful man, Dr. Vaidyanathan, and let us hold on to hope, because otherwise we've got nothing. General Katoch, a very practical question. It's like ivory poaching. Utility goes away, the poachers disappear. Pakistan's utility to play these dirty games with the erstwhile American administrations, now utility with certain factions within the Saudi regime, thankfully not directly linked to the ruling faction. When does the utility itself, General Katoch, you can hear us, when does the utility itself go away?
Rishabh, I think your entire audio went off for some time. Could you just repeat the question,
when does the
please?
utility of Pakistan playing dirty games go away, sir?
Oh no, the utility is not going to go away, Rishabh, and the reasons are very fundamental. One, you see, the earlier speakers mentioned that terrorism does not have a religion. But that is a cliche. Terrorism may not have a religion, but terrorists have a religion and the exploit them, exploiting those religious sentiments. Not going to go away. It has got less to do with religion, rather it has got much more politics of the religion. And that is why the Sunni Shia rift is not going to go. It is a
Okay, you'll forgive us. Yeah,
interest in the world. Who is going to get supremacy over that part of the world? Now, having said that, no, I want to get down to Pakistan. You see, as far as Pakistan is concerned, they have promoted this radical Wahhabi ideology, which took a steep upward.
Okay, General Baroja, you're going to have to forgive
so
us.
for anybody to think that Pakistan can come back now, it's too late in the day. It's not going to happen.
Okay, so that boils down to reality checks.
Yeah, Rishabh.
I'm going to put the same question to Ambassador Sajjanar. Ambassador Sajjanar, I mean, somebody sits down in Rawalpindi, okay, and they're going, okay, I've got the puzzle pieces figured out, right? We will appease a Wahhabi faction, okay, who we have to hope is still with us in the Saudi Arabia because the ruling faction is cutting its loans to us by doing something against Iran, okay. Then we'll blame the Balochis so that we can crack down on them harder because the Balochis are terrorists, and then we'll get the Kulbhushan Jadhav or the others to link the Balochi terrorists to Indian supports. Then we tell the Iranians, no, it's the Indians who are funding these terrorists against you, it's not us. Come on, nobody buys it. So, I mean, what are these guys smoking in Rawalpindi?
Two or three things, let me put it here. I think you said very rightly, you know, as a blueprint, as a toolkit on paper, maybe it looks excellent. It looks beautiful. But I think there is many a slip between the cup and the lip. And I think that is what happens. And if people in Rawalpindi, and I'm glad you used Rawalpindi and you didn't mention Islamabad. Because I think when you said, is there going to be reformation, hope of reformation in Pakistan? My answer would be the chances are very slim. I hear what Dr. Wailawad says, and I hear his note of optimism and hope. But I am very, very doubtful because I think in addition to the fissures and the fracture as the religion is concerned between the Shias and the Sunnis, and you know, we see it across the world, you know, how the Islamic world has got divided. But I think as far as concerned in terms of Pakistan's support to terror, it is also to do with the polity of that state. Rishabh, we need to understand that, you know, the real power there really rests with the army and the intelligence agencies. So, you know, the people there might realize that their support to terrorism is not leading them anywhere, is not giving them any benefit, not giving them any advantage. On the contrary, it is acting against their interests. But they are not the decision makers, nor is the government, nor is Mr. Imran Khan or his maker. The decision makers are sitting in Rawalpindi, and what are their interests, that will determine and that will rule.
Okay,
in terms
okay.
of
So what do we then
do.
make of the moment that has happened, that the Iranians have said, we are going to go in and free our people, okay? We know what you're up to, we understand your game, and now we're going to act. It's not like Iran has, you know, perfectly clean hands in Iraq either, Ambassador Sajjanar, but this time they have been victims of strikes that have come in from Israel. We know that in the past, and very recently assassinations which can only be linked to forces operating in alignment with America. So Iran now acting against Pakistan, what does this tell us?
No, I think there will be, let's say, tactical coming together whenever there is a need to, because you know, there is, at the moment we see also, there is no love lost between the United States and Pakistan also, except that the United States needs, and even during the Biden administration, you know, whether it is Jake Sullivan or it is Antony Blinken, both of them have said that there is going to be a review as far as the Afghan policy is concerned. So the need of Pakistan for America will continue for some time, because, you know, they will like to get a connect to the Taliban, because they will need to, if the US forces, troops are not going to be leaving in May of 21, they will have to reach out to the Taliban and they will have to go through Pakistan. So in that sense, the utility of Pakistan for the Americans will be there for some time. So when it is to act against America, both Pakistan and Iran can work together. But I think when it is the self-interest, the survival of the state and the people is concerned, then there is going to be much greater friction.
So it's a complicated muckhole. It's a very, very complicated muckhole. Professor Nalapat, now where do we fit into all of this? Because when just a few years ago we were telling the world that this is exactly what happened to Kulbhushan Jadhav, that he was in a border town in Iran, he was kidnapped, taken into Pakistan, and then paraded around as an Indian spy and terror promoter or terror sponsor. So now we know this is a pattern of events. What do we do with it?
Well, I'd like to say, Rishabh, that I don't believe that anybody in Iran, or for that matter, anybody serious in Pakistan, would ever buy the line that India is behind these problems in Iran. For one thing, India, I mean, of course, even regarding Pakistan, I don't believe India has indulged in anything other than moral and diplomatic support. But even that moral and diplomatic support, it has been made clear that it relates only to the territory in Pakistan. And none of the Baloch friends who are in India, who have been allowed to visit India, I mean, they have been very clear as far as Iran is concerned. Sorry, please do not get involved with Iran in any manner. Please concentrate on your country and improving the human rights of your country, Pakistan. Well, that has been made very clear, and I'd like to say that, therefore, this nonsense peddled by the Pakistan military is not believed even by the military. Forget anybody else. I would only like to make the point that regarding the Pakistan military.
Yes.
Look, I've always been surprised that the United States and the UK and other countries, I mean, they're not sanctioning the generals in Pakistan. And one of the reasons could be the same reason why certain people who have been caught for terrorist acts in America are not being extradited back to India. And, we are being told to talk to them on video conference or something like that. Well, the reason is that the lot of dirty tricks are played by Pakistan. And may I say, I am also quite certain that Pakistan is also being used to play dirty tricks for China in America and dirty tricks for America in China. The Pakistan military is completely open-minded where it comes to that. So long as they can get the money for houses in Miami and New York and London and Melbourne, they don't care where the money is coming from. So this is the reason why they have got a certain immunity, and this is the reason why it's imperative that they be sanctioned, that there be consequences for this kind of action.
But we've been discussing this because Pakistan is in shambles, and now I feel, initially one could gloat about it, but what's happening is rampant inflation. We saw what happened with the bread prices and the selling of the donkeys. We are seeing a breakup of the Pakistani economy. Pakistan has no industry left. It has power blackouts because it simply does not produce any power. Bangladesh's GDP is now greater than that of Pakistan. It does not even account for the GDP of one single state in India, Maharashtra. And who are suffering? The Balochis, the Sindhis, the Kashmiris. These are the people suffering. The only people not suffering are those in the Fauji corporation and those that rule the country, whether it be the feudal lords or it be the new feudal lords, which are the Pakistani state represented by the army. So now in specific terms, Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, sir, what would it be required where we have now seen specific targeted sanctions against CCP officials by America, those who have been ruling in Hong Kong and Xinjiang, that unless we make Pakistani generals pay a price, they lose their properties in Dubai and London and their investments abroad, they are going to get rich off this.
No, you're right, Rishabh. But the way I see it, there are two things. One, we were talking about, the total disconnect between the ruling junta there in Pakistan and the ordinary people. Because it is not the interest of the ordinary people that will determine as to what the policies are and how they are going to be implemented. The second aspect is the geographical position of Pakistan. And in that context, the question that you pose is America still thinks that it needs Pakistan to take care of the issues as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Not only as far as getting its troops back from there, but also, so to say, leave in a responsible manner, not leave in a hurry. And in that context, they will always think. You would recall that, the first 2 years of Mr. Trump, it was 2017, 2018, till the time that Zalmay Khalilzad was appointed as the special envoy for Afghanistan of 2018, it was President Trump was going hammer and tongs against Pakistan. You recall his tweet of 1st of January 2018, the fact that he withheld all the funding that was going under the CSF, under the Coalition Support Fund, and so on and so forth. But then very soon, and you recall also his August 2017 strategy, South Asia strategy, in which he said that the pressure on Pakistan is going to be increased. None of that in their calculations worked. Then they turned over and they started good offices. They started appealing to the good offices of Pakistan to reach to the Taliban.
Yeah,
so I think under the current circumstances, that is also going to happen. That will continue to happen, and I don't see any change in the foreseeable future.
Okay, so that of course is that we are vacant spectators to all of this. We are not vacant spectators. Dr. Wael Awadh, what is the role of India now in exposing the genocide in Balochistan, in calling for action against the Pakistani army, in supporting Iran in whatever way that we can? What is the role of India now?
I think the role in India will remain the same of its own independent sovereign foreign policy of promoting human rights, values and democracy all over the world. And I think with the new US administration, India will find its own role in the global affairs. And therefore, we should not push India into a kind of a tit for tat or into internal affairs of any country, besides only promoting democracy and human rights value and fighting it in all the international organizations. And I think that India can do. And Baluchi people need the support not only of in Iran or in Pakistan, all over the world. Any group is being subjected to human rights violations should be supported, and there where the organization takes place. My only point is that when I talk of terrorism, it's terrorism. I know that no one can fight terrorism alone, but let's see at South Asia as a whole. It is going to be a very bad, grim future of fighting terrorism if we don't fight it together. And if Pakistani do not realize as soon as possible, this is definitely going to be in a mess and it's going to be more difficult, especially when the American is pulling in a hurry from Afghanistan. They're trying to promote back revival of ISIS in Iraq and in Syria, revival of this. There's clear indication that the Democratic Party in the United States going back into managing the crisis, not finding a solution. So unless and until regional players and regional order is being created, we are going to face lots of problems. That's my take on this. And that's why I always hopeful that nations can come up to the mark of their own people to lead this and prosper.
Okay.
In this part
I just want to touch upon, and I've got a couple of minutes left. Dr. Wael Awadh, what is now a reform movement required, sir, within the Islamic nations? I don't know who's going to lead it. How do we end this Shia-Sunni war?
It is very simple to read. Nobody has to bring religion into their power. There is no one is worth leading any religion. Religion is your own follow. It is you preach what you teach. You preach what you do. You don't practice your religion. It means you are just political Islam. Keep religion away from your governing and let the people of the region really survive. We do not need. They are falling at the hand of the vested interest nation, and that's the whole crisis of the Muslim world, where nobody is thinking that Turkey or Saudi Arabia or Iran want to lead the Arab world. Who will let you lead the Arab world? Who is telling you to lead on Islamic values? Values is only you make me good Muslim if you are a good person for practicing good things in life. Leave the religion apart. Do not mix the two together.
Okay, let me leave the last quick word with General Katoch. General Katoch, for obvious reasons, as we look towards the West, what is the lesson that can India offer, sir? That we've had, issues within Hindu religion, we've had issues within the Islamic faith in India. We're trying to do reform like triple talaq, but we do not have a perpetual sectarian war going on in this country, sir, in any faith. What is the lesson that can be drawn by world powers and world leaders and world citizens from India?
I think, Rishabh, this has much to do with the cultural construct of India for the last many thousands of years. And it is that cultural philosophy which has flown down over the years, which has resulted in when invaders came, they settled down in this land, and I think that philosophy gained hold over them. And even when the Christians came, the same thing happened. Very correctly said by Mr. Raj that, and people leave religion out and continue with their life, I think a large number of the problems will go away. Unfortunately, I don't see it happening. It's not going to happen because that is not the nature of the human being.
Okay.
And so long as people can be exploited through religion, I believe the exploitation will continue, and I think we will.
Okay, so I'm going to make a public appeal.
So we will have to live with it.
I'm out of time. I'm going to make a public appeal to all individuals watching this broadcast, whether it be on television or online platforms. So much scrutiny is spent, as it should be, on what is wrong in India. My appeal to you is spend equal amount of academic scrutiny and effort in what is right with India. Why is it that we do not have these levels of sectarian clashes? Why is it that over so many years, the Muslim population in India has continued to grow, where it is now larger than that of Pakistan? What is the creation that we do not have this kind of sectarianism within the Hindu faith? What is the lesson that can be drawn from this? What is the reform that was required to be applied in a subcontinental experiment which can be replicated across the globe? This is the story of India equally. We know we have our problems. We're never going to be perfect. But if the hope of humanity lies in one country, it has to be here. The hope of humanity is here.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.